Hello, this is lesson 6.3, part 1, percent of a number. And you should have received this handout before starting the video. Please, if you don't have one, you can download it from my PowerSchool website where you found this video. It'll be on the same page. So press pause if you don't have it in front of you, and press play when you're ready to continue. Okay, so what we're going to do first is we're going to look at this table, and what this table shows us is a couple of tricks and rules that we can use to find basic percents of a number. So let's say you wanted to find 1% of a number. There's a rule that you can use here. So here's the 1%. The rule is you're going to move the decimal point 2 places to the left. Okay, so go ahead and write that down under the rule column. And then in the examples here, we're going to show you how to apply that rule. So let's say we wanted to find 1% of 28. We would put our pencil where the decimal point is, and in this case it's after the number, and you move the decimal point 2 places to the left. So then our answer becomes 0.28. So that's 1% of 28. Okay, we'll box our answer. And so let's try it on a different example. 1% of 120. If I wanted to find 1% of 120, again, I would put my decimal point at the end of the number, move that 2 times to the left, and then my answer would be 1.20 or 1.2. So let's write that down, show the little loops in red, and then box your answer. Okay, let's look at the 10% rule. On the 10% rule, to find 10% of a number, you move the decimal point 1 place to the left. So write that down in that column. And then we're going to move on to example 1 or 2. Press pause if I'm going too fast. To find 10% of 28. Okay, so 10% of 28, you're going to put your pen at the end of 8 and move it 1 time to the left. And so that means 10% of 28 is 2.8. Okay, it's that easy. Oops, let's make sure we have the decimal point. There we go. And then 10% of 120, again, just move it 1 decimal place to the left. Okay, so 10% of 120 is just 12. Now let's take a look at the 5% rule. So 5% rule, the first step is to find 10% of the number and then divide your answer by 2, which makes sense. We would divide by 2 since 5 is 10 divided by 2. So we're going to find 10% first and then divide by 2. So let's look at example 1. We're going to first find 10% by moving the decimal 1 place to the left. So that's going to be 2.8. So I'm going to write here 2.8. But then we divide our answer by 2. Okay, so then 2.8 divided by 2 is 1.4. Okay, and then 5% of 120. Okay, again, we're going to move the decimal point 1 place to the left. Okay, that's 10%, so 12 is 10%, but then we divide it by 2. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So 5% of 120 is 6. Okay, now let's take a look at the 15% rule, which is a combination of the previous 2 rules. So the rule is you find 10% of the number, and then you find 5% of the number, and then you add your 2 answers together because 10 plus 5 is 15. So 15% of 28, let's try it on this one. Again, 10%, we move it over 1 time to the left, so 10% is 2.8. Okay, and then we're going to divide it by 2. So in my work here, I'm just going to write 2.8 divided by 2. Okay, that's going to equal 1.4. And then you add these 2 together. So you get 4.2. That's 15% of 28. Okay, let's try that for 120. It's pretty easy. You're going to first find 10%. Okay, 10% of 120 is 12.0. I'm just going to write 12. And then you find half of that to find your 5%. Okay, so that's going to be 6. And then you add the 10% and the 5% answer, and you get 18. So that's 15% of 120. Now the 20% rule involves using the 10% rule. So the 20% rule is you're going to find 10% of the number, which we know how to do now, and then you double your answer because 20 is double 10. So let's try that with this one. Okay, find 10% of the number, which we just moved the decimal one place to the left. So that's going to be 2.8. Okay, that's 10%. And then we double it. Okay, times it by 2, and that's going to be 5.6. So 20% of 28 is 5.6. Again, with example 2, find 10% first. Okay, so 10% of 120 is 12. Okay, and then you double it. 12 times 2, that's 24. So 20% of 120 is 24. Okay, so for the next 3% rules, they're kind of all related because we have 25, 50, and 75%. Those are all quarters or half. So for 25%, the rule is you multiply by 1/4 or divide by 4. Okay, so here, when we say find 25% of 24, you can either just divide this by 4 or multiply it by 1/4. Essentially, they're the same. So I'll show you what I mean. If I use a fraction, 1/4 times 24, okay, I'm going to cross cancel, and I have here, I'm dividing by 4 here. Okay, so it's just taking 24, dividing it by 4, and you get 6. So 25% of 24 is 6. Okay, 25% of 160. Okay, you can use a fraction, which I'm going to use a fraction. Okay, just because 25% is actually 1/4. Okay, that's the fraction equivalent. And then you're going to just cross cancel. You're dividing 160 by 4, which is 40. And then your answer is 1 times 40, or just 40. So 25% of a number is just 1/4 of a number. And then the 50% rule is probably the easiest because 50% is half of 100. The rule is you multiply by half or divide by 2. So write those in there, and then let's just do 50% of 24. You could just divide that by 2. So 24 divided by 2, okay? I'll do it the division way. That's 12. 50% of 24 is 12. And then 50% of 160. Okay, I just want you to show the rule in action. So you take 160, all right, divided by 2. And that's going to be 80. And then for 75%, that rule is you multiply by 3/4 because 75 is 3/4 of 100. Okay, so let's take a look at 75% of 24. So now we are going to use the fraction 3/4. Okay, and this is really easy to do when you have a number that you can cross cancel with 4. That's when you want to use this rule. And then you do 3 times 6 is 18. So 75% of 24 is 18. And the other way you could think about it is divide the number by 4 first and then multiply that by 3. Okay, so here 160 over 1. We're going to divide by 4 first. Okay, so we get 40 here, and then times it by 3. 40 times 3 is 120. So then for the last two rules, they are related because they are thirds or 2/3 of 100. 33 and 1/3%, you're going to multiply the number by 1/3 or divide it by 3. And 66 and 2/3%, you're going to multiply the number by 2/3. Okay, so let's apply those rules. Okay, so 33 and 1/3 of 39, you do 33 and 1/3% of 39. You do 1/3 times 39, and then you can cross cancel. So the 3 goes into 39 13 times. So 1/3 of 39 is 13. Okay, for example 2, you're going to do the same thing. When you see 33 and 1/3, you're just going to take 1/3 of that number. So 1/3 of 600, Okay, again, you can cross cancel here. 1, make this 200, is going to equal 200. Okay, and then so 66 and 2/3 of 12, we're now going to find 2/3 of that number. So 2/3 of 12. Okay, we're going to cross cancel the 3 and the 12, and we're going to get here 1 and 4, and then we multiply 2 times 3, so that's going to be 8. Okay, 66 and 2/3 of percent of 150. You take 2/3 of 150, so you divide 150 by 3, and so that's going to be, divide by 3 would be 50, and then you multiply it by 2. 2 times 50 is 100. And that's all for your notes. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.